So how much more money did you see the chamber in some way, shape, or form being able to amass and spend, let's say in the first half dozen years after you arrived here, let's say by the Reagan-Mondale presidential race in '84, how much
Well, it's night and day. The first election cycle, all these business PACs probably collectively raised about $1.2 million.
in '78?
In '78.
Yeah.
And I'd say by '84, remember, but by '84, we had already had the recall elections in Macomb and Oakland County, and we had the special elections in early in 1984, January, I think, of '84, to fill those recall-created vacancies. And I know that the business community responded very well. And by that time, I had put together a network of like 55 local chamber PACs. Some would just raise $500, but some would raise $5,000, and some would raise $15,000. And collectively, those local chamber PACs put in $35,000 along with the Michigan Chamber into Kirby Holmes's Senate race and Rudy Nichols' Senate race to bring about a new majority in the state Senate.
So by, let's say, the mid-'80s or the '90s, how much were all these groups spending compared to the $1.2 million they spent back in
Probably
'78?
3 times the amount.
3 times that
Yeah.
much. Okay, the other thing, of course, that you were starting to do was declaratory rulings. You were asking
Well,
for?
the Michigan campaign finance law made provisions that an interested person could ask for a declaratory ruling from the Secretary of State as to a proposed course of action, and then the department was required to respond. The department also, in lieu of issuing a declaratory ruling, they could also issue an interpretive statement. It wouldn't be binding upon the department, but at least would give you their thinking. And so what I tried to do was kind of shape the Michigan campaign finance law administratively by asking the right questions at the right time through declaratory rulings and later interpretive statements. Later on in our discussion, I'll talk about how my requests for interpretive statements on PAC payroll deduction by public bodies basically led to a state Supreme Court decision, and then later the codification of that state Supreme Court decision, in the Michigan compiled laws. But back in 1979 and 1980, all the way up till the Republicans gained control of the state Senate in 1984, the chances of changing the Michigan campaign finance law legislatively was pretty hit or miss. And most of the legislative changes that we made really were to kind of ease the administrative burden placed upon these new PAC managers. And also, I wanted to change a couple of provisions of the campaign finance law because I just didn't like how its impact upon the Michigan Chamber's PAC. When I came to Michigan, Barrett said, you can do anything you want with this PAC, pretty much, except change its name. And he said, we spent almost a whole board meeting going over a name for the Michigan Chamber's Political Action Committee. And instead of calling it the Michigan Chamber Political Action Committee, they called it Mich Biz PAC, Bus PAC, B-U-S. And I looked at that and I said, this looks like it's a PAC for some bus company. And he says, well, we're not changing it. And so then I was able to get some legislation enacted that required that the name of the sponsoring organization had to be included in the name of the Political Action Committee. So then it was the Michigan Chamber Political Action Committee, and then State Chamber PAC was the.
So the legislature cooperated in getting the name changed better than your own chamber did. Well, did you get the feeling as you move forward that the Democrats and/or labor, organized labor, were catching on to what you were trying to do? Was there any pushback from them? Because you were taking a different approach. You were using the Campaign Finance Act. You were asking for interpretive statements, in a way that I realize that act didn't exist, I guess, before, 76 or 77. But I would think that they would have been a little worried.
Well, we had to fight a battle as early as, I think, 1980. Secretary Austin attempted to promulgate some administrative rules that were fairly restrictive. And I had learned from my Wisconsin experience that when somebody's trying to promulgate administrative rules against you, you sue the bastard. And so I remember probably the first lawsuit, called Michigan Chamber of Commerce versus Austin, was a lawsuit basically challenging administrative rules that Richard Austin was trying to promulgate to restrict separate segregated funds, under the campaign finance law.
So as time goes on, what do you see the key dates and occurrences politically and in terms of campaign finance and everything you were trying to do at the chamber as the 1980s rolled along? I mean, you're going through election after election.
The first thing, I think, was in early 1982, there was a special election to fill Billy Hoffman's seat in the state Senate. He had resigned his seat to become a lobbyist, and that provoked it was an overwhelmingly Democratic district. It was like Hazel Park, Ferndale, a little bit of Royal Oak and Troy. And, it was a Democratic district. And we had just fought a major battle in the legislature on workers' compensation. And Gary Vanek, who was a state representative from Royal Oak, was running in this Democratic primary. And he had voted against the workers' compensation reform package. And he got the endorsement of the MEA, the UAW, the AFL-CIO. Dana Wilson, another Democratic state representative from Hazel Park, was running in that special primary election to fill Billy Hoffman's seat. And he was smart enough to know that, hey, if I vote for these work comp reforms, then there's a bunch of PACs out there that might support me. And we did. And the business PACs and the first stirrings of this local chamber PAC network, got involved in that Democratic primary, and Gary Vanek won. Gary Vanek lost that race to Dana Wilson, and that, I think, showed organized labor that maybe these business PACs were going to be a substantial challenge. And in 1982, the threat that organized labor had put out, that any Democrat who voted for these workers' compensation reforms, we'll go after you in Democratic primaries. Well, they failed with against Dana Wilson, and also, in August of '82, they failed in most of the Democratic primaries. They had a few wins, but not many, and the business community was there through these new political action committees to help even up the odds.